How can we ever expect Betsy to be a gardener if she's got no arms to garden with? Join us today as we give some arms to our beloved lady here so that she can hold her trowel with glee and plant some pots. Let's get into it. So we are going to go through a full rundown today of how I do my hands from scratch. If you haven't seen me make hands before, don't worry. I'm going to be going through it step by step, and we're going to be doing lovely little opposable fingers. So let's crack on. Now I'm going to start with the shape that I want for my arm. Now it's important to note that you can do any style, size, shape of arm or hand that you want. If your character's a different creature or it demands something different, you can literally just draw out a pattern, cut it out twice, and we can make a skeleton with that. But with what I'm going to do today, this is the bare bone principle of how you can adapt and make arms for yourselves. Before we get started, a very quick disclaimer. I use a mixture of very professional and incredibly unprofessional methods when making my puppets. If you see something here today that works for you, that's fantastic. But if you see something that you can't stand, it's totally fine. This is just how I make mine. With that said, I'm going to get my beloved trusty arm pattern out here. I think it's quite good to have folders for different body parts. This is my feet, arms and other limbs folder, and I've got a head folder and a miscellaneous body part folder, but this is the folder I'm using today. And this is the hand shape I'm going to go for. It's very easy, very simple. Typically, a lot of cartoons and Muppets have 3 fingers instead of 4. I don't know why. I don't need much foam, but I am just going to get a little scrap of it. And the idea is we're going to begin by drawing just the hand. You can see where there's sort of a faint beginning of a line here, and that's because I'm going to draw out the hand in foam twice so that we've got the inside of our skeleton structure and somewhere to put our wire so that we can move our fingers in the future. So I'm going to not draw the entire arm. We don't need that in foam. I'm just going to do this hand once each way and see where we go. I feel like ever since I realised that people really love this sound that I've sort of unlocked an obligation. So I'm going to just have to let you hear it every time. For context, some people really like the sound of the Sharpie on the foam. So let's just give you that if that's what you're interested in. Oh, that was a good one. Okay, I've done one. I'm just going to do the other one the other way. When you cut out your foam skeleton, it doesn't have to be neat at all, because the way we're going to connect them together means that it's going to be a disaster no matter which way you put it. So don't put too much effort into cutting these out. I'm just getting the best shape I can get. I didn't manage to get one of our sessions out last week, and that is because it was my birthday and I was whisked away, surprisingly, for a metal detecting weekend. An extra surprise on top of that was I got a bloody huge magnet, a very powerful magnet, and I stuck it down a well. I found a spike and a rusted padlock, but it was thrilling. Priorities change as we grow up, is what I'm realising. So I've got my pieces of cut out hand here, and I need to kind of know at this point what orientation I'm thinking of making this hand. Is it going to be the left hand or is it going to be the right hand? And for that, I've done a little bit of a Blue Peter, and I have made one hand already, and you can see that this is going to be the right hand, and that's because the thumb is at the top, and I've bent it in such a way where it's positioned forward. If you look at human hands, our thumbs, when you hold out your arms, are on the top. So we need to make sure that when we fashion this arm, it's a left arm. So I want to make sure that this is going to be the orientation that it sits in when we make it, and that's going to translate as well when we cut out the arm pattern. So don't worry if you don't understand that, but that is what we're going to do today. I'm going to make a left arm for my right. So I've got my left arm here, and I know that the thumb is going to be positioned up when all is said and done. So I'm going to take this one away, and I'm going to use this bottom one here to lay down my endoskeleton. And to do that, I've got some very thin wire and some cardboard. You don't need any fancy gizmos or 3D printed stuff. This will do just fine. I'm going to start by measuring up roughly the size of this palm area here, and I'm going to cut out a square that best matches that shape. And I'm just going to curve around the bottom edges so that it doesn't poke out of the hand when we stitch it together. And then it's going to rest like that, and that is going to be the base of our endoskeleton. And from here, I'm going to make 4 holes, 3 here and 1 here for the thumb. And I'm going to attach a wire line into each finger and hot glue it in so that it stays in place, and that becomes our endoskeleton. So the thing we need first is some little holes in this. So I've got my big chunkier sort of needle here, and I'm going to pierce with this big chunky Yankee needle that I've got, hole in my cardboard and wiggle it around so that it gets a little bit larger. And I'm going to do that for every finger so that we've got a place for the wire to go. So I'm just piercing this cardboard here, wiggling it around, making it quite nice and large, and then I'm just going to measure up for the thumb where's best in the line of sight. Lovely. That is literally all you need for the base of your skeleton. And then the next thing we're going to do is grab this lovely wire. I swear by this wire. I think it's jewelry wire. It's very thin, but it's also very malleable and incredibly easy to cut. And it can stay strong if we fold it over like we're going to. So I'm just going to get my wire cutters here, chop a little bit off, and then I'm going to fold it in half. So I've got one loopy bit here and then 2 ends here. And I'm going to get my 2 ends and I'm going to put it through the hole that I've made. It's a little bit fiddly. Sometimes it bends a bit, but persevere. I'm just going to wiggle that through, bring that around, and then you can see that I've got 2 bits, one of the loose bits and one of the loop bits. I'm going to bring those loose bits through the loop, making it extra tight at the bottom, and then I'm going to twist all the way around until I get to the end of that line, just like that. And then I'm going to measure how long my finger is, and from that I'm going to bend my wire back so that I know how long the finger's actually going to be, and then I'm going to just do an extra case of wrapping that all around. So we give it lots of strength, but it's still easy to move. And any little spiky bit that's sticking out, I'm just going to get my pliers and compress it a little bit so that it stays not spiky. So that is what we're going to do for each finger, and I'm going to rinse and repeat this process for every single one. Okie dokie. So I've just finished putting all of those little bits together, and now it's time to make a hand sandwich, if you will. No, it's not. Here I am, future me, editing this video as we speak in my weekend casuals, and I've missed out an entire step, arguably the most important step, and I can't believe I've forgotten it. So bear with me and I shall take you through it. So despite me having them on my desk the entire time and cutting them out specially for this video, I completely forgot about handles, arm rods. Now, you don't have to get one of them fancy arm rods online that cost like 20 to 40 quid. There are loads of things you can use for arm rods. For Dr. Cecil here, I use knitting needles to kind of look like a walking stick and play upon that thing. But what I usually do is use coat hangers. When we made our moving eyebrow mechanism not too long ago, I cut these out at the exact same time, and this is what I've got here. It's really cheap, so much better, in my opinion, than having to buy something online if you don't need to, and it's just a much better, cheaper alternative, and that's what we're really looking for here. So before we make the sandwich, it's important to put them in the hand. Now, I've got my endoskeleton here, and I'm going to get my glue gun and I'm going to place it just like this. I want this rod to come out of the bottom of the hand, so when all is said and done, the bottom of the hand is going to be supported like this with the rod structure. Don't put it on the side with the thumb, because as I've very confusingly tried to explain, the thumb is the top of the hand, so make sure that rod's going to come out at the bottom of the hand here. So now I've got my endoskeleton lying down here, and I've got my glue gun that's warming up really nicely, and I'm going to try and get it to lie as straight as I can. I've made the hook a little bit big, that's my bad. You don't have to make the hook as big, but I think personally coat hangers are a really great alternative if you're just looking for your puppet to be made on a cheaper, sort of tighter budget. And I'm going to get my hot glue and place it all the way around my hanger here, and then I'm going to just do a little bit along the finger line so that we've got some sandwich strength when it comes to pressing them in together. And I'm going to make sure my endoskeleton is lining up really nicely, and then I'm going to make the sandwich. So I'm going to get my other hand and press it down, making sure my endoskeleton is inside. This might hurt quite a lot, but I'm going to press it down, and then once that's solidified, you should have something like this. And with my next method, which is incredibly unconventional, I like to sew my hand together so that it kind of morphs into a 3D shape, and you get something that looks a bit more like a hand. So when you do that, literally just sew around it and it keeps it in place a little bit more. But this is what you should do if you want to have an arm rod in your puppet to be able to operate and move their arm freely. If you don't want to have an arm rod in your puppet and move your arm freely, that's totally fine, and that's your choice. But this is if you do want that, and I did want that, and I don't know why I didn't do it. So I'm very sorry, and when we cut back to past me, you're dealing with the ignorant version that completely forgot everything. So please excuse me, and just know in spirit that an arm rod should be there, and I'll get to making this for Betsy so that poor thing's got something to move her arms with. But thank you so much, I'm very sorry. Normal progress resuming. And now that's sandwiched together and a little bit more secure, I'm going to go above and beyond with its security, and this is where I get a bit unconventional. I'm going to sew around the edges, because not only does it keep it together, it actually kind of cements it into a really nice hand shape and gives it a sort of like a 3D structure. So I've got my needle here, and all I'm going to do is a simple in and over, back through the bottom, in and over, back through the bottom. And as we do it, I'm going to pull it really nice and tight so that you can see how instead of just a straight line where we've cut the foam, it's kind of curving it around a little bit and making it a little bit more like a 3D shape. You can see already, see what I mean when I say that it gives it a little bit more structure and makes it look like an actual hand? We've got posable fingers, which is going to be really, really fun and sweet, and that means she can hold the shovel that we make for her in the future. So now we've got this, the time has come to do the skin, and for that I'm going to need more of her polar fleece. I've got this lovely rusty orange fabric here that I've been using for Betsy, and I'm going to go onto the smooth side. When you use fabric like this, there'll be a smooth side and a bobbly side. The bobbly side is the front and the bit that we want to show off. So I've got the back here, and I'm going to get my hand pattern back out. My cousin who watches this got really annoyed that I was using Sharpies and biro pens on fabric, so she's got me some fabric pens, which is very nice. I'm going to draw two of these, one way, one the other way, so that we can connect them together. Apparently, I mean, I've never used fabric pens before, but I'm told that you can just like apply water to them or get a rubber and they'll just rub out as if it was pencil, which is quite nice. I'm not going to do that, but it's nice that I've got the option. Wherever you decide to draw out your hand on your fabric, it's important that you have a little gap around the edge. And that's because when we cut it out, we basically want to leave a seam line so that we can sew it together all nicely and we're not infringing the actual size and shape of the pattern in any way. So don't draw it like right on the edge with nothing around it. Just give it a little bit of room. Doesn't have to be much, just give it a little bit of room as you draw it out. So you can see that my pattern has ended, and yet I've got these lines here, and that's because I like to add a little bit of extra length into the arm. Because I'm going to be shoving it into the body, I don't want any of my actual arm pattern to go in and lose that length. So I'm just going to, here where this line is on my pattern, bring that up to the line that I've drawn. I'm just adding a tiny little bit of length onto the end of my pattern there. And now I've drawn these out, I'm going to cut them out, and as I cut them out, as I said, I'm just going to leave a small gap around the edge to act as that seam line. And what I mean by that is going all the way around, just leaving a tiny little bit there for our sewing. But you'll see that quite annoyingly, your fingers have like a long bit here, and we want to make sure that we can get that length, because if I don't cut at the very end there, the fingers won't be able to separate after a certain point. What I'm going to do in this instance is go all the way to where I've drawn, but that is only for the finger joints here. Everywhere else, where you can, leave a little bit of a gap as you go around where you can. But I know it's a bit confusing, because if you do leave a gap, you're not going to get all of that length of the finger that you want. So I sacrifice that by just going right into where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew all the way around here, but when I get to here around the top of the finger, I'm going to leave a big long gap all the way down to kind of the wrist area, so that we can turn this back outside in and shove this endoskeleton into it afterwards. So I'm going to sew all the way around the edges, and then I shall rejoin you. I have sewn up this arm, but I have left that little gap. Now what is next to do is turn this bad boy outside in. I always say that if you struggle to get things outside in, just get a Sharpie or a pen of your choice and just begin pushing it through, and with a little bit of resilience and patience you'll get there in the end. Okay, just like that, and we've got our hand that's now outside in, and this again is going to be a bit of a fiddly procedure, so I ask you to bear with. Shove this, you can squeeze it, you can move it as much as you like, shove this into the cavity that we've left open, and just like a glove, get those fingers inside to line up with the finger case that we've made for it. So it's taken a bit of time and a lot of encouragement, but we're finally there. We've reached the fingers, so now we've got these lovely bendable bits here, which is going to be amazing. The next step is to sew this up, and then we're going to stuff them. So all I'm going to do for this is just a stitch in and out, and sew that up really nicely, so then we can move on to the stuffing. I think I've got a pretty good colour match actually, so I'm going to use that to sew it up, and there we have it. I've sewn up the side, and we've got a little nice finger situation going on here, lovely posable bits. And if you just, all it takes just to make it look a bit more like a living hand, I'm just going to squeeze it in and curve it round a little bit so that it looks like like a palm that's meant to be this orientation as opposed to just like a flat thing. And do you see how it kind of just adds those creases in that just make it look like this is the palm and this is the back, in case anyone was any more confused. And then this combined with this is going to make both of the arms. So the next step is to do the stuffing. You could totally use foam if you wanted. I don't really see any point in that because foam's a bit more expensive than stuffing, and it's not really going to add anything. It will make it look lovely and smooth, but it's not really going to add anything more than that. So what I like to do is use stuffing instead. Now I've got a bunch of stuffing here. You're always going to need a little bit more than you think you're going to need, I find, because when you press it into the places you're going to stuff, it really kind of compresses itself. So I always just get a little bit more for safety. I'm going to grab it, roll it up into a little nice ball like so, like this, and then I'm going to stuff it into this little hole here. Now this might look quite small and a little bit fiddly, and that's because it is. So in order to overcome that, I've got my trusty Sharpie back out, and I'm just going to push the stuffing into the arm with the Sharpie. You can see how that's just going in a lot nicer and a lot easier. Once that's in all the way, I'm just going to feed it through to the very end of the arm, because we don't want any bumpy bits or lumpy bits. We want a nice, straight, smooth arm. So I'm making sure that goes to the very end of the arm, and I'm going to rinse and repeat that. As we go as well, just press that arm in. If you see any lumpy bits that have got a bit more stuffing than others, just give it a little press so that we can try and make it as even as possible. If you wanted at this point, you could kind of make a little groove here and bend it round so that you've got a mimic of an elbow in case you wanted a little light bend. So just don't fill it all the way, give it a little bit of a gap and bend it round, and then it will kind of mimic an elbow should you want that. Okay, so here are our two hands, and if you recall me saying this entire time in a very confusing manner, the thumb goes at the top. So this is the right hand, and all I'm going to do is put it in today. I'm not going to sew it in because I'm not quite sure yet what clothes she's going to be wearing, and I don't want the arms to get in the way. And often I find it much more beneficial if you attach the arms after you've put the clothes on. It just makes it a little bit easier to dress her, given the hands are so big. So I'm going to put them in for now, but I'm not going to sew them into place. And I've got a little gap here where I've left it for the arm to go in, and I'm just going to wiggle that in, and then same for the other side. And as I bring them in, I'm just eyeing up if I've got them sort of the right length, and if I haven't, just to make sure they're in the right place. Okay, and there we go. Bear in mind her arms are not attached yet, so this will look really seamless and much more like a shoulder than it does currently. But these are the little hands we've made. I'm super chuffed with them. She's getting on really well. She looks so cute. I really like the shape of these little hands, and I think I'm going to even make some gardening gloves for her, which I think will be really cool. But this is what we've got so far. I think it is important, if you are making hands for your puppet, to just keep them detached. If there's anything I learned from doing Dr. Cecil, it's that it would be a little bit more practical if his arms weren't attached from the get-go, because he was a little bit of a bugger to dress. So that's my advice. If you are making hands for your puppet, make sure you've put the clothes on before you attach the arms. So I'm going to leave these separate for now, but I really hope you enjoyed today. If you did enjoy yourself and you found it relaxing, please do subscribe and ring that bell so that you can be told when we next upload another session. I promise I'm not going to go away metal detecting or magnet fishing anytime soon, so do ring that bell if you'd like to stay in touch. Thank you so much again for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I shall see you in the next one. Goodbye.